Ross, first off, thank you so much for spending time with us today, amigo. How are you feeling and where are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Kurt. Really honored to be on the show. So I'm here in Santa Monica in our new RDM Santa Monica office on the promenade right above the Foot Locker. I'm in our special library room where we have all of the cool business and software books on shelves along the wall for our folks to read.
Oh, I love that. I got to visit the office a couple last month. Henry, your co-founder, took me by. We were at the .LA summit, and we just took a walk down the block, and it was great to be back in Silicon Beach.
Yeah.
Congrats on the office. It looks and feels great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really enjoying getting people together in here. Last night we actually had probably 10 people, which is a small fraction of our company these days, but still felt like a lot of people to have together in these pandemic times. And we played board games, and it was amazing. It made me realize
Yeah.
how much I miss that type of interaction.
Yeah, well, speaking of getting together, last month we both shared for probably what for both of us will be a lifelong memory, and for so many reasons. And to catch the audience up, we got to go to Kelly Slater's surf ranch, the perfect man-made wave in
Yeah.
Lemoore, Central California. So, for those Ross and the audience that might not be familiar with the surf ranch, why is it so unique?
Oh my gosh, the surf ranch. I mean, literally a childhood dream come true is the best way to describe it. But to get more specific, the surf ranch, it's a gigantic swimming pool. Imagine a swimming pool about the size of a football field in the middle of nowhere in California, somewhere between Bakersfield and Fresno, just total nowheresville, California. And on one side of this gigantic swimming pool, they have a gigantic device that creates a perfect 6 foot wave, like the wave that you draw on the cover of your notebook in school, just a perfect barreling wave, um, both a right and a left. That it's just a dream come true, and it's incredibly exclusive out there in the middle of nowhere. And it was really the first of its kind, or the first good wave, like first real kind of world class, great surfing wave that was man made. And the fact that it's so good and therefore so sought after has spawned a massive industry of other people creating these man-made waves with different technologies and different locations, with resorts and amenities and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of, it started as an experiment out there in the middle of nowhere in California, and it's become kind of a movement. This surfing the perfect wave. It's the perfect quest, I think, for anyone getting that perfect
Yeah,
wave.
yeah, that's great. I love that description. The thing that occurred to me, and we got into this with a couple episodes, and one with Zach Weisberg, CEO and founder of the Inertia, who was with us, is that Kelly's done an incredible job creating the conditions for magic, not only in the wave pool and being able to surf that perfect wave, but just the vibe and the whole ambiance of everything. And it was a great event. Like, um, we had you and I had surfed a little bit together, but we hadn't really spent
Yeah.
that much time. That was kind of like I think our first kind of time spending extended time in it. They just really created a space for people to kind of let their hair down, and just hang out, and regardless of ego or status or any of that stuff. It's almost like the water and the wave are sort of the big equalizer.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think it's funny. I've thought a lot about that, like why it was that it was so easy to connect with people at that event and how we all found such commonality. And I think it's two things. One thing I think is having that kind of external thing that we're all focusing on, this wave that's just so perfect and so magical, and we're also excited to be a part of it. It naturally creates all the space for us to talk with one another and kind of all be focused on this thing that we all want to experience together, that shared
Mm.
experience. And the other thing I think you talked about is, surfing itself is such a humbling activity, right? The ocean is always going to win. The wave has so much power. You're really at its mercy. And so I think for the people that engage with that, it creates a natural humility, and that humility just makes it so much easier to connect with one another authentically, you know?
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, well, that's probably a good segue. So you very similar to me. I grew up in Ventura. You grew up right up the road in Santa
Yep.
Barbara, and we both went to
Yeah.
UCSB. I grew up surfing. It sounds like you did too. When did you start surfing, and why do you think it calls so many of us that do it so deeply and profoundly?
Yeah. So let's see. I think I probably started really surfing when I was maybe 13. I think up until that point, I was at the beach, most weekends with my hippie parents, who were themselves surfers. And, but I think until I kind of hit my teenage years, I just wanted to boogie board and splash in the waves and play with my friends. And then once you're a teenager, you finally start to think like, okay, surfing is cool, and it's important that I'm cool now, so I better start surfing for real.
Totally. I was content boogie boarding in junior high.
Nice. See
Yeah.
that you're actually cooler. That's the funny thing, right? That's actually the cooler way to be, authentically. But yeah, so my uncle gave me this old 7.2 pintail single fin, like lightning bolt, just classic 70s style shortboard, as my very first surfboard, and I loved that board. Oh my god, it was so cool, so retro and awesome. And that's the board I learned to surf on when I was 13. And my local spot was the Pit, aka Hendry's Beach, aka Arroyo Burro. And around the same time, there was another kid who surfed there named Bobby Martinez, who was just doing things that none of us understood in the water at
Yeah,
that time, and went on to be a super pro and
yeah,
be an
legend.
amazing surfer. And meanwhile, I stayed a very average surfer.
And where do you surf mostly now? Like Zuma, north of Malibu?
Yeah, probably Zuma's where I prefer to go on the weekend, but probably the beach I'm at the most is Will Rogers, kind of by the jetty. It's where they filmed Baywatch, and it's kind of where all the families hang out. So on the weekend, I'll just go with my kids, who are 6 and 8 and learning how to surf themselves. And there's just them and a whole bunch of other little groms and families, and we're all there together splashing around. So I'll just fill the car with like wave storms and skim boards and boogie boards and fishes and every type of board, and we show up to the beach and just pile it all there and mess around. It's very fun.
Sounds like you're living your best LA tech life, my man.
It is a very LA tech life. And funny enough, the beach, it's a good place to network. There's a lot of other like tech people hanging around the west side these days. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, Silicon Beach. Well, I definitely want to get into that, what you guys are doing at Artium, which is incredible. And I'm biased because my wife Holden is a designer with you guys, so I'm
And Holden is
partial.
amazing, by the way. Like I'm so happy to have Holden. She is truly an amazing visionary designer.
Oh, yeah, I learned a lot from her too. So I'm lucky to be married to her. Well, yeah, we'll get into that, but let's press rewind, and that's very sweet of you to say. So thank you, Ross. And we'll definitely dig into RDM in a bit, but I'd love to press rewind, and we have a shared experience of UC Santa Barbara, where we both went. What a beautiful campus. Curious what you learned at school that has been timeless and stuck with you or propelled you to where you are now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing is probably computer science. Despite UCSB's reputation for being a party school, we actually have a very rigorous science and engineering program. So going through the CS program at UCSB is no joke. It's quite rigorous, and learning that foundation of theory from some really amazing professors, I think, is that's been really special. And I think at the time that I did computer science, it was still technology had not become what it is today. It was still a pretty niche strange thing to do. The class sizes were small, and we were all fairly, you know, we were obsessive nerds at the end of the day. I can't think of another way to put it, but we really loved computers, and it was kind of like for the passion versus for a viable career. So that was great. But I think the other thing that was so unique to UCSB was the social education, just the fact that, you know, with Isla Vista surrounding it, and just with the spirit of openness and spirit of freedom, where everyone was happy to meet everyone else. And, you know, there was a lot of partying, but it wasn't just, you know, drunken debauchery. It was also just a lot of, you know, going to the beach together and community, and just this real feeling of openness. And I think through that, you know, I started to learn how to socialize as a little computer nerd, who hadn't done a lot of that. Being somewhere like UCSB, you know, really opened my world to all the different types of people out there, and you know, how, kind of to what inclusion feels like. Like, it felt like a very inclusive place to be at that time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And what you were describing, that social kind of bit, what came to mind for me was imbibed curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like it was good times. It was very magical time for me in many ways. What do you think there's anything that's changed fundamentally in computer science, like that, from when you went to school, you know, 15 years ago, whatever, 20 years ago to now? I mean, I guess kind of for context, like, you know, from my understanding, you know, especially the UC system, it was always like, I studied communications. It was always very theoretical. It was the
Yeah.
theory of it versus the practicing of it. Do you
Yeah,
think
that's
there's
absolutely right.
anything
So, I mean,
that's
we didn't really learn how to do software development well. You know, it was purely the theory underpinning building things, which was both valuable and frustrating. I think at the time I found it very frustrating. You know, I was doing this because I wanted to build things. I wanted to build software. I wanted to, you know, build experiences on the computer. And we were learning theory for the most part.
you didn't want an
Um,
abstracted description? You wanted to go build.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, give me the tools. Come on. Like,
Yeah.
where's the craft? Where, you know, where's the thing I can wrap my hands around and keep getting better at, right? And so I was really excited when I got to learn that in industry. But looking back on it in retrospect, I'm actually really glad I got those 4 years of pure theory, because I do think that, you know, being able to tie the craft back to that is important. The truth is, the theory, you know, the theory and even the craft, even the act of building software, hasn't changed as much as I would have expected it to. There have been some iterative improvements in terms of tooling, and there have been some new algorithmic discoveries. I mean, especially in the world of AI and ML, you know, there's been a lot of advancements and a lot of new algorithms that allow us to achieve things that we couldn't achieve
Mhm.
back when I was in school. I actually specialized in machine learning, so I got a lot of exposure to that stuff early on, but it was just in a very, very different state back then compared to now in terms of what you can do with off-the-shelf libraries, and even, you know, just the algorithms that people have discovered at this point. Um, but you know, I think we might be on the cusp of a big change. You know, I do think that the ML capabilities are getting to a point where it might start to fundamentally affect how we build software. But it hasn't happened yet. And
Mhm.
up until now, we've still been kind of climbing the same, you know, local maxima of the how of writing code. You know, we
Yeah, I mean,
still,
even no code solutions are simply just another abstracted layer, right? On top of
yeah, yeah,
everything.
and they're, you know, you're not really, like, notably, none of the no code solution companies are themselves using no code to build their platforms, right? They still write code. So, like, they're still employing, you know, software developers that write code. They're not employing no code specialists. They make the no code for people that aren't software developers. So I think, you know, until you have something where you're almost able to build the system with the system itself, um, the no code stuff is just kind of a shiny thing to make some toy apps, but it's not really going to fundamentally change the nature of software development as a craft, right? So still waiting for that big breakthrough. I think it'll happen in my lifetime, but have yet to see what it is. And I think it's going to be ML though. I think it will be driven by AI and ML, not necessarily affecting how we write code, which is kind of the latest stuff that's come out, is around like auto completion of code and auto suggestions and that kind of thing. But I think it'll be more like describing kind of a different way that we interact with computers through language.
How do you think? Well, I think this gets into some other stuff that we'll get into with RDM. But maybe what we could do is maybe turn the page to some of your career. And so after school, you had a gig. I'm looking at your LinkedIn now, and you did looks like a stint as an engineer at business.com, but then quickly got into Pivotal, which I think is a really incredible sort of 2 chapters in your career. Why don't you catch the audience up on Pivotal Labs and why Pivotal was so important? And like, just for context, like my wife Holden, who's world-class software designer, was I was aware of Pivotal just because of her have talking about it so much. And so when I met your co-founder Henry, and he sort of shared the story that you guys were ex-Pivotal folks and building out kind of a next gen, that was the sort of the light bulb for me to connect you guys to Holden, and I'm really grateful that she's thriving working with you guys. But I guess that was sort of context. But what and from the research I've done, like that firm, I don't know if it still holds true, but it had a reputation of essentially being like the Navy SEALs of software development. You guys like saved Twitter when they were having that fail whale. Yeah, give us the background on that.
Yeah, so I mean, Pivotal, that's where I learned the craft of software development. That's where I learned how to do that thing, and where we all learned how to actually be effective. Taking that theory and letting it underpin, true craft and a true method for that craft at Pivotal. And that's really what the company was all about, right? We were all about the how of building software, mostly around developers and how software engineers wrote code. But along the way, we also started to incorporate design and product management in there as well. And really, it was a place where the best of the best got together to hone their skills and build great software for other companies. You mentioned Twitter. That was kind of a notable example of Jack Dorsey is freaking out because Twitter is not scaling, and the whole point of the platform is to be this massively scalable thing. And he reached out to Pivotal, and we sent about 30 engineers over there to get into the inside of Twitter and really re-engineer it. And when I say re-engineer, it was re-engineering from the perspective of rewriting some of the fundamental bits and pieces of code inside of Twitter, but it was also re-engineering a lot of the people stuff. It turns out that a lot of success in software organizations has to do with the dynamics of how people interact with one another and how work kind of flows through the system of people, and creating the opportunity for just kind of freedom and empowerment, but in a disciplined fashion, so that you can harness the energy of all these super, super smart people, but kind of coordinate it all in the same direction, right? So that's really what we did at Pivotal. It was all about that team level software development and putting the right amount of methodology and some really counterintuitive practices in place. Like, for example, paired programming, 2 people working on the same computer, test-driven development, where you actually write a test for the code before you write the actual code. And these things that kind of don't work that well in theory, but work amazingly in practice. And you kind of, we could only find out about through experimentation. So we were just pushing the envelope, right? And I was very lucky to be there during a period where I got to participate in the pushing of that envelope and learn from just some incredibly smart people that have, gone on to do amazing things. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, Pivotal now, it's there is no more Pivotal. It's VMware. It was acquired by VMware, and it still kind of exists in spirit. But a lot of the best folks have really kind of gone on to do other things at this point.
Yeah, so that's great background. So you had basically two stints there. I'm looking, you were there for about 3 years from 2006 to 2008 as an engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
then
right.
you went off and you did, it looks like you founded a company or two. And
Yeah, a couple
then you
different
went back.
startups.
Yeah.
Those were, learning experiences, I think is the term we use in the industry, right? For things that, they went well, but it wasn't like retire well.
Yeah. So Lotte, it looks like you did that for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
VC-backed startup in the online payments and gifting space,
Yep.
make wish lists, thoughtful, personalized online cards, and so forth. Seems like the great idea. Maybe you guys were just a little bit too early.
Oh man, it kills me that we were just a little bit too early, because we
Yeah.
absolutely were on track to be Venmo
Yeah.
um, before we decided to basically sell it off for, basically sell it off to just kind of recover the investment at that point,
Yeah.
and a little bit more, but not much. But yeah, we should have stuck with it. But everybody in this industry, you have a million stories of shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Hmm. What was the big, what are you really grateful or proud of around that experience?
Oh man, I mean, honestly, I think that was the first time I got to build a team from scratch of developers. Um, and I was really proud of the team I built. We had a really amazing team, not just in terms of assembling some awesome people, but I think we all learned from each other and really created a culture where we pushed each other uh, to become better and had fun doing it. And honestly, I mean, I think I always kind of knew that that's what I liked to do, is, be with other passionate people and kind of push each other, but also have a really good time working together. But that really crystallized it for me. It's like, okay, that's what I want to do with my career, is build these environments where we can all kind of level each other up and just have a really good time building things.
Hmm.
That's what life is all about to me.
Yeah, and then you went back to Pivotal, and that was the real big growth spurt. And you were there 7 years.
Yep.
Started as director of SoCal, and then expanded through Texas, and then took over the entire region. And then the company went public, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was another great experience, building a bunch of teams from scratch. And also, really at that point, pivoting over and building a business as well. That was the first time that I was no longer, purely on the tech side. I now was also responsible for business results, which
Mhm.
was interesting. 360 degrees of running a regional sub business. There was a lot to learn there.
Yeah. What are some highlights of that kind of second chapter at Pivotal?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that's a great question. So I remember starting out. I mean, I was living in San Francisco at the time and just flying back and forth from LA to San Francisco. I made my first hire was one Mike McCormick, who actually works for me here at Artium today. And he ended up being kind of my right hand man and going off and doing, amazing things at Pivotal in his own right after working under me for a little while. And started with the two of us, and then suddenly we were 10, and suddenly we were 30, and then 60, and then hundreds, and then we opened Texas, and then took over San Francisco, and then I found myself at the New York Stock Exchange wearing a suit and participating in this bell ringing ceremony, and then of course going out and partying our faces off in New York afterwards. And the whole thing just seems like a blur. Honestly, it was a really wild ride going from that, something that I'd been a part of very, very early on and really seen it in its nascent stages and been a part of kind of defining what made us special, all the way through the public offering, was really exciting. And I think, yeah, I mean, man, one of the funny things I remember is the very first time I did a customer call kind of moving over from that pure tech side where I was very shielded from customers to now being very business facing. And I just did so badly. I was so bad on the phone talking to customers in the beginning. And it took a lot of practice to get good at that. So that definitely sticks out as one of those kind of pivotal moments, pun intended. Moving from, pure tech to now 360 degrees of tech, sales, people, the whole shebang.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I had a kind of opposite experience going into a more technical role at a couple gigs back at Esri and being kind of over my head and had to dive into the deep end and learn how to swim pretty quick. And it's those moments are fun though, because then you really get to see what you're made of and sort of where the edges are, right?
Yeah, man. I think that's what life is all about. It's all about like pushing our boundaries and trying to become the best version of yourself you can. I think that's the most satisfying thing. Most satisfying when you're surrounded by people that are doing it with you, I think.
And then you guys also at Pivotal built a product, Pivotal Tracker, that was very successful too. Was that sort of an accident, or was that like just brilliant strategy, a bit of both?
Oh no, it was total accident, honestly. I mean, it was this interesting thing where you kind of buck all of the conventional wisdom in terms of how you should take a product to market, and it still works out really well. Um, so Pivotal Tracker, I mean, it was the very first thing I actually worked on in my first stint at Pivotal, was building this little Ruby on Rails app where we decided that we needed some problem to solve to allow us to kick the tires on this new framework, which was called Ruby on Rails. New at the time. That gives you a sense of how long ago this is. And we had a bunch of sticky notes on the wall. Like, this was how we organized our work, the kind of canonical agile backlog, in our case from extreme programming. And we said, well, let's take all these sticky notes that we have on the wall and put them into software. And so we started building Tracker without talking to any users, without doing any sort of customer development, really running no business case, no nothing. I mean, really never intending to commercialize this product. We just built it for ourselves, designed by developers. And then, from there, we started using it with our customers, and then customers really started to like it. And customers would say, hey, can we actually keep using this after the engagement's done? And then pretty soon Google called up and they said, hey, we'd actually like a version of this that just sits behind our firewall. So can we just like install it ourselves? And then after a while, we realized, just the servers were fairly expensive because we had so many people on this thing and it was just taking on a life of its own. So then we started to charge for it. And it turned into, a pretty legit business. I mean, funny thing is, it was always, even though I think we were best known for Pivotal Tracker, the big money makers for Pivotal were Pivotal Labs on the services side. And then on the software side, it was Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which was this enterprise cloud middleware product that was very expensive and very heavyweight and really just meant for, companies that are running tens of thousands of workloads and want to take advantage of, internal data centers as well as the public cloud and multiple public clouds and kind of organize all of that work into a standard workflow. But yeah, Pivotal Tracker, I mean, I still think that was an opportunity that we should have poured more gas on. And it's still out there. I mean, it's still a great product, but it's really not under very active development at this point.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. At Hunt Club, where I'm GM, we have a new software offering that's basically taking some of our core tech and just repositioning it into the VC and private equity market, and we're getting a lot of traction.
Oh, really? What does it do?
Essentially, it helps. It does relationship mapping and strength of relationship, sort of social network analysis, and there's a whole mechanism for being able to essentially curate and connect the dots on warm introductions quickly.
Nice.
So we're selling. I've sold it into Sequoia Capital and Anthos and some other big firms, and
pretty decent logos. Well
I
done.
know I'm feeling really grateful, but it was sort of maybe not quite as accidental as what you're describing at Pivotal, but there was just some, last year with COVID, the business, people weren't hiring, right? So
Yeah.
last year was a tough market for recruiting. This year is the exact opposite. It's like
Oh, I
feast or
bet.
famine.
Yeah.
So we sort of made some lemonade, so to speak, out of the lemons last year with some downtime.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's funny. We did the same actually. We got a whole joint venture off the ground, like a whole adjacent business in the beginning of COVID, because I think I just freaked out. I was like, oh my God, did we just start a company at the worst possible time? Like, we got to do something. Let's start a whole other business at the same time.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into RDM, and I can just seeing how busy Holden is. COVID definitely has sort of accelerated digital transformation and pulled things forward. And why don't you catch the audience up on what is RDM and why you guys start it? And I get some other sort of questions I want to dig in here.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So yeah, basically, I mean, RDM started because um, myself and my co-founders, we really recognized that the shift to software-driven business was accelerating and becoming basically all-consuming. I mean, man, this was before COVID. I would never have thought that it could accelerate even more than it already had. But with COVID, I think the move to digital mediums being the primary means of interacting with customers accelerated. So when I first started in the industry, I think, I was in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and we were running around telling everyone, hey, tech is going to take everything over. We're going to disrupt all of the big industries. Just wait. And everyone's like, yeah, maybe. But like the biggest companies are still going to be oil companies, and like Sears isn't going anywhere. Blockbuster is still going to dominate home video rental, that kind of thing. And it was all very theoretical, but we were pretty convinced. Fast forward to more recently, and it's like, hey, it happened. The biggest companies in the world are tech companies. They're companies that have this software development capability internally. As a fundamental part of their DNA as a company, they have the ability to build and release software. And every time they build and release a successful software product, it spawns all of these other opportunities to build and release successful software products. And each one of those spawns new opportunities to build and release successful software products. So the companies that have that capability inside of them have this massive competitive advantage, really insurmountable competitive advantage over companies that don't, right? And so then we started to say, okay, well, what does it take for a company to have that capability? There's what we were doing at Pivotal already, which was really this team level. Hey, you need engineers that can write code well. You need designers that can design, and you need product managers that can basically, understand the market and drive the entire effort forward, right? That has to go really well. And we learned how to do that pretty well at Pivotal. We also realized that we can improve upon that, right? That's one of those things that's never done. There's always a better way. We can always iterate, do it even better, right? And I will say Pivotal, it kind of got to a certain size, went public, got acquired by VMware. At some point, the kind of iteration and experimentation was not what it once had been, because the organization is bigger, there's more politics, you're kind of a public company now, it's harder to really innovate. So we saw a lot of opportunities to get better at the how of building software. And we wanted to do two things with that. One, we wanted to work with our customers to just deliver great software for them, like take their vision, wrap our heads around it, get great products out to market. Two, we wanted to teach them how to do it, right? So that they have, at the end of our engagements, they have that internal capability. It's a part of their DNA now. It's a part of their company, right? They can do it over and over again forever. But that team level capability is only part of the story, right? As you're successful in software and your products grow, you also need people, right? So having hired and built teams for, at that point, 15 years of my career, and having a pretty deep understanding of how to do that well and how to do it in a different fashion than I think a lot of the industry. And this is specifically around, engineers that I'm talking about, and designers and product managers, those true kind of core contributors that make up your software development organization. we realized that our customers needed that too, right? So in the same vein as our product development, we also said, well, hey, we have this kind of differentiated way of looking at recruiting for engineers and designers and product managers. We can do that for our customers, and we can also teach them how to do it in that same consultative model. We want to give them the capability to basically interlock their software development process, the way that they get products to market, with the way that they attract talent and the way that they onboard that talent, right? So that was kind of the second piece. So it's like software development capability wrapped into talent strategy. And then the final piece that's also necessary is leadership, right? You have to be able to lead this whole organization, this thing that you're building, in this kind of, in a way that I think when you do it well is a little bit different than the way it's been done historically. You know, if you think historically, leadership looks like kind of command and control, you know, organizing everything in this really tight ship where everybody knows their exact job and they kind of stay in lockstep and just do their one thing. But when it comes to all of these, you know, really highly paid and really educated, super smart, super capable knowledge workers, it turns out the best way to organize them and the best way to lead them is by empowering them and supporting them, right? But you also have to be able to kind of empower them and support them and give them what they need while having everyone pull in the right direction, you know, and while having everybody actually run toward the goal and run toward these kind of agreed upon objectives at the company level. So there's a real challenge in terms of how to give people the supportive environment and give them the freedom to really, you know, be out there for the cause, to kind of take ownership of these problems and solve them, you know, use their vast knowledge and their vast expertise to solve it flexibly while also keeping everyone aligned. So we kind of realized it was those three things. It's software development capability, talent strategy, and leadership strategy. And like, if you can do all three of those, that's a software development capability in a box, right? So that's basically what we sell at Artium. And we sell it by very much doing it. You know, we're going to get those results. We're going to build the software. We're going to get products to market. We're going to build those organizations. But we're also going to teach along the way. So it's very much that kind of teach you how to fish through doing it, right? Through proving that it works.
Yeah, the thing that was really fascinating to me when I first heard the model from Henry, I actually met Henry on Lunch Club last summer. We got a blind date on Lunch Club and made buds. So thank you to Lunch Club for that. And he was describing how you guys going to come in and do this accelerated software product development, service, work for hire. But then the part of the magic is this talent bit, which is that second sort of circle you were describing, and you actually can recruit and leave W-2 employees behind for the clients, which is, I thought that was really another counterintuitive thing. Like,
I think that, and even we had that concern, right? We were thinking like, wow, is the reason that nobody does this because we're going to basically be cannibalizing our own business on both sides?
Mm-hmm.
That was the worry. But I think we had this belief that as long as we're serving our customers in this really authentic fashion, and we just really make it all about making our clients successful, and being loyal to them, that it'll all work out in the end. Like, as long as you just build something really valuable, then the fact that we're kind of like putting ourselves out of business in accounts by making them self-sufficient won't matter. And so far, that's really proving to be true. I mean, I think luckily the pace at which the industry is accelerating and the demand for software out there is just growing at a rate that no one can keep up with, ourselves included. So we don't have to worry too much about that kind of potential for cannibalism.
That makes a lot of sense. There's just the market is just so vast and so many problems to solve. COVID has accelerated, this digital transformation, and it's bananas. And then you add the macro environment with interest rates at 10,000-year lows, all-time lows interest rates. These big pension funds and endowments, they can't get the yield from bonds anymore, so they have to get riskier, and they allocate to private equity, which allocates to VC, and then that money all flows into tech, and then
Yeah.
you guys are out the other end of receiving that to go do the work. So
It's a little frothy, not gonna lie. It probably won't last forever, right? But you figure over the long term, it's bound to trend up.
yeah. I mean, I wonder though, like I read a book called What Technology Wants by Kevin Kelly. He co-founded Wired magazine. He founded the Whole Earth catalog. Guy's incredible. And he had this crazy premise for the book that technology is the eighth biological kingdom, and that essentially, as metaphorically speaking, as God created man, man has created technology, and it has its own self determination to go forth and procreate.
Wow, dude, I love that. That is a really cool way to think about it.
And in that same breath, like maybe tech is not mean reverting. Maybe it's just this factor that is just like, unstoppable for better and for worse. And it gets into Elon's concern about AI and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. Like one thing I sometimes think about it is it's not like we're talking about like, the electricity powered businesses out there. It's like, well, yeah, obviously every business uses electricity. Or like even more fundamental, we don't talk about the language powered businesses. Like, yeah, those businesses that like speak language to one another and communicate using language, like it's ubiquitous, it kind of goes without saying. And to your point, that could be what tech is. It's just like, it's going to be ubiquitous and kind of fundamental to every interaction going forward. I definitely think, I mean, it's funny. I was having a conversation earlier today about how, humans inventing the thinking machine, it's just by far the most important and impactful invention we've ever created. And we're only at the beginning of that. But I love the way you put it.
What is the thinking machine?
Huh?
The computer being the thinking machine?
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing that thinks outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's, think about the implications of that, like when you really boil it down. So I think that's, for RDM, I mean, that's really what drives the vision, is this notion that, hey, there's a future where software and how we leverage those thinking machines is going to be the deciding factor on whether we're in this kind of great, beautiful future where humankind flourishes and we all get to live our best, most authentic lives and, do human things that humans love doing, like pursuing the creation of perfect waves and surfing and going to outer space and making a perfect wave on Mars. How awesome would that be? Surf a wave on Mars. We should do that. Or this kind of dark, terrible future where it's like 1984 and we're all these like cogs in some terrible machine, or we're just eradicated. That's the other possible dark future, right? So I think, getting that capability to kind of harness this insane power that we've unleashed is really important for us.
Yeah, it's going to be wild to see like what the 2020s unveil. I mean, even just, the 2010s, and I mean, the iPhone had just come online in 2007, and then, social media was a big thrust through the last 10 years. But as we get, more automation and some of this AI getting more real, I'm really fascinated to see how long before it's, self-driving cars are like the norm and all that kind of stuff. All the businesses that are going to come out of that, like you could probably, come up with some sprinter van scheme, and you could have a piano in it and somebody's taking piano lessons while they're in the back of a van having to commute somewhere on demand. I just off the top of my head, who knows?
I like it. That's got legs. That's a good one.
That was kind of cheesy and dumb, but
dude, but it's funny. I mean, it almost feels these days like the world is getting so crazy that things that seem silly could absolutely become the reality. It's like the ownership of purely digital assets.
Oh yeah,
was like a joke 10 years ago, and it's completely a real thing now.
Yeah, my there's a trader at my brother-in-law's firm, Arca, Sasha Fleischman. He's Dan Fleischman's nephew, and Dan I saw posted on Instagram this last week that his nephew Sasha, who works for my brother-in-law, had basically bought $12,500 worth of Axie Infinity a year ago, last Thanksgiving, in this virtual real estate. And this Thanksgiving, I guess he was bragging to his uncle that he sold it for $1.5 million.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
1,000x return in a year. That's incredible. Like, it's just absurd. It's bananas.
It makes it so real when you know the person too. It's like you hear about those stories and it's like, really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I think like I want to get into kind of the back end of the show, and I want to be sensitive of time too. But one thing, if like just my spidey sense, and if it's not appropriate or a good time to share, we could punt on this and even edit it out if we want. But the similar to what we're doing at Hunt Club, kind of spinning out some new business, and what you guys did at Pivotal, or is there a thought where you guys, if you're cannibalizing core business, use it as a platform to launch some other products into market?
That's a pretty good spidey sense, Kurt. You.
I might have some. That might be a loaded question. I might already know the answer.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I was like, wow, if you really just divined that, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, I think, we're looking at that entire software development lifecycle and the patterns that, having worked with at this point hundreds, if not, well, probably hundreds, I'd say thousands is probably a stretch. Hundreds of software organizations, you see patterns of how communication happens, how they're organized, how information flows through them, not just on the software development lifecycle, but also in terms of how individuals interact with one another. And we definitely believe that there's a way to instrument these organizations and create effectively an operating system to run them successfully. And if you think of what that needs to look like, you have to have a baseline of measurement that allows you to say, how are we doing? And then make changes, and then see how those changes affect that baseline measurement, and then do that over and over again, right? So if you kind of structure the work where you have, the market as kind of this great arbiter, it's like you're trying to build software that captures a market and captures as much of that market as possible, whether that market is made of eyeballs or made of money or made of attention, kind of whatever it is. Your goal is to capture that market and beat your competitors, right? And you do that via this feedback loop of basically releasing software and learning and, seeing how it does in the market. And also your organization has a feedback loop of, making hires and arranging teams and stuff, and then seeing how that team is performing. And if you instrument it kind of at every layer, you can actually start to predict what the future will look like. And I'm kind of intentionally being very vague here because I don't want anybody else to build it before we do, basically. But you can kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. Hopefully, it's basically the RDM way, you could say, encoded.
Well, yeah, you started reading it between the tea leaves too. It's essentially this idea where if you have really expensive engineers, how do you unleash their creativity and let them, just be more productive with their, engineering?
Yeah. Well, and I think the funny thing is, so when I first was in this industry, it was basically, at least the part that I was in, it was all engineers, right? Like that's who was building software. It was basically engineers. And you might have some kind of like business person at the top saying like, okay, guys, this is what we need you to go build. And I can say guys, because I think back then, especially, it was really mostly dudes, right? I think we're making a lot of progress in that respect right now, which is great to see. But back then it wasn't quite as enlightened. But I think the other way that we've become a lot more enlightened is that there's all these other roles now. It's not just engineers. There's product managers, there's designers, different types of designers, right? There's, like I said, there's talent, like kind of HR, recruiters, like all that piece plays a massive part of this organization. And then there's leadership as well. And like all these different people have to come together to create this iterative outcome. So it's not just about instrumenting the engineers. It's also about all these other people that contribute to successful software businesses, right? You kind of have to include the business and the market and these other aspects in it, because at least in our industry, right, we're not kind of creating a work that stands alone. We never create like, and here's our piece of software. It's on the CD and you're going to get it in the mail if you buy it for $49.99. It's like, it's this ever breathing, ever growing, ever changing mass of code and data. And if you're doing it well, you're making changes to that system, to this thing that's like alive, like multiple times a day, right? So I think the question is kind of how do you have an organization that makes those changes well and quickly and efficiently and safely, such that they kind of meet the objectives, such that they actually have a positive impact on capturing that market. Yeah, I think that's what that kind of healthy, world-class software organization looks like, right? And I think, anyway, we want to build software that helps guide organizations toward that.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. It sounds like you guys are wanting to essentially kind of build some tooling to harmonize collaboration and the complexity that comes along with all those, different kind of actors or folks in a particular environment. So that's awesome. Well, I guess we'll stay tuned on that front.
Yeah. I think more to come there. I mean, we've got a pretty awesome team working on it. So I'm really excited about what they're going to do.
Yeah, cool. Well, turning the page, one of the core themes on the Kurty D Show is humanizing success, and I've shared with you, Ross, some of the challenges that I've overcome, and
Yeah.
I really do believe the bigger the breakdown, the bigger the possibility for breakthroughs. And having said that, what is a challenge personally or professionally that you've faced and overcame that you're comfortable sharing, and what gift did that challenge or pain give you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, one that I alluded to earlier is, I think for me personally, and I don't want to get too much about like, myself, but I think at the end of the day, like, I did computer science and